World Consumer Rights Day is celebrated on the 15th of March. And this year, as every year, there is an aim to encourage awareness about consumer rights and needs across the world. Today, for our Good Morning SKNs Looking Back, we warmly welcome Paul Queeley, Director of Consumer Affairs. Mr. Queeley is here to tell us about how the Federation commemorated World Consumer Rights. Welcome.
Morning, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. So the first question, how did Consumer Affairs commemorate World Consumer Rights Day?
Well, as you mentioned, World Consumer Rights Day is celebrated on the 15th of March, and within that week, we started our week of activities from the 13th to the 17th. We started with a church service at Zion Moravian Church on Sunday. Monday, we had our radio informative sessions where officers from the department went to the various radio stations and they basically spoke about what the theme is about so that the general public can have an understanding of what is going on with the theme. On Tuesday, we had our businesses sensitization forum. And the purpose behind that was to inform various businesses around Bastia, mainly Port Zante, about what would be required of them under the new legislation that we have before the Parliament. There are a wide array of changes that will be coming with this document, so it was important that we highlight to them what will be required of them under the new legislation.
Can you tell us a bit about that then? What are some of the changes?
Well, the biggest change would be officers would be able to issue citations if persons are in breach of the act. Right? Many years past, we've been speaking to store owners about what they should do under the legislation, but the current legislation that we have, it does not have adequate teeth behind it.
No.
So we cannot really enforce it to the degree that we may want to. But with this new legislation, we will be able to do so.
When is it going to come on stream?
Once we finalize all the comments from the stakeholders, it should be ready for second reading, maybe in the second quarter of this year.
So, store owners, take heed.
Be mindful. So now that we're getting the dentures fixed, as you said, we're putting extra teeth to it. Can you explain to us what is a consumer, or who is a consumer?
Are you finished with the activities?
Not as yet.
Let's backtrack a bit and then we'll come back to that question.
On the 16th, which was the Wednesday, we had our staff retreat with our counterparts in Nevis, Nevis Consumer Affairs Department, to sort of strengthen the bond between both agencies so that we can work better together.
Okay.
On the 17th, which was the Thursday, we had a panel discussion, and the panelists were Alex Strawn from JADAP. We had Quincy Prentice from National Bank, and we had a representative from ECCB. The name is slipping at the moment.
That's okay.
Yeah, but the focus behind the panel discussion was to mainly speak about the theme, which was fair digital finance. You know, businesses are in this age, they're doing a lot of transactions online. You can buy food, you can get an Uber, you could do all sorts of things according to what part of the world you're in. So on the panel discussion, we basically highlighted how you should conduct your business, the safety mechanisms behind card transactions, if card companies are allowed to charge a minimum fee for using your debit card. Those are the things that customers may not be aware of.
So that's where the whole concept of the word fear comes in, because it has to be balanced.
Right.
Right. So it's not to take advantage of the consumer, but to
Not at
balance
all.
everything. Okay. But at the same time, the person selling the goods needs to get their share as well.
Yes, but you cannot get your share at the detriment of the rights of the consumers. So it's always important that we highlight what the rights of the consumers are and what the businesses can do under the current legislation from what they can do.
I like that.
Okay.
All right. So as you mentioned, it's not only material goods that we can touch, but also services where the whole concept of fair trade was discussed. Yes. Interesting. And what are some of the main consumer rights and responsibilities?
Well, please allow me to read them to you.
Sure.
The right to basic needs, right? The right to safety, the right to information, which is information on labels, so that you can know what is in the packet, what is in the product, if it has any allergens or anything. The right to choose, and that is a fundamental right that persons seem to overlook sometimes. They don't seem to understand the power that consumers have. You can take your business elsewhere, so that is why you have the right to choose. The right to redress, if you have an issue with an item, you're supposed to be afforded the opportunity to have someone hear your concerns and remedy your concerns.
Interesting, because I can actually think of situations where someone might have a concern, but there is so many persons in the chain before it reaches to you. They might say, well, I did not make this product. So how would you deal with a situation like that? Because they weren't the manufacturer, but they were selling it on the premise that the product could do this for the consumer.
Well, you see, that is where warranties would come in too, because if you're selling a product, a warranty is supposed to be behind that product. And you, as the salesperson for that item, you are acting basically as a middleman if you purchased it from someone overseas. So if something goes wrong with that item, you're responsible for remedying what issue that product has, whether it is refunding the person or exchanging the item. Number 6, you have the right to representation, which is what the Consumer Affairs Department does. We represent the consumers who have issues. The right to consumer education, and we do that as well. This is part of it. And the right to a healthy environment.
Okay. Now you mentioned something that I want to ask a question on. In terms of labeling, you mentioned in terms of ingredients, but what about if the label is in a foreign language and there's no English next to it?
Well, at this moment, there is no current legislation that would say it has to have English on there. But the new legislation that I spoke of earlier, it specifically states that you have to have English on the item or it will be removed from the shelves.
Okay, because we have lots of importers that are not importing from English-speaking countries. So, so they have other languages, and we are not even able to sometimes understand the ingredients. So, you know.
Well, what we used to tell store owners is, especially food items, you could put your own label on there stating what the item is. So that is one route that we took with store owners. But until the legislation actually comes into force, we will not be able to actually penalize them, I would say, for having them there.
So in what ways can consumer make more informed choices?
Consumers would have to pay more attention to the items that they're purchasing. If you see an item today, it's for $5, and tomorrow you go back, it's for 25 cents. You would have to really focus on that item closely too. There's a strong possibility if it's a food item
it's expired,
that it's almost about to be expired.
Okay.
So another thing, if you're purchasing, let's say you're purchasing building materials, you would have to find out from the store owner what are the terms and conditions for purchasing these, because we've had instances where persons purchase building materials, I'm not going to say from where.
Don't.
And if they wanted to return the items, the store would say that you have to pay a restocking fee. Now, building materials are very expensive. So, if you have to pay a restocking fee,
It's more expensive.
it's going to be a high amount. All right? So, you really have to pay attention to what are the terms and conditions of your purchasing.
Some of the concerns of consumers, one of which was the rising cost of living, which seems to be affecting everybody. But do you have any advice for us in terms of how consumers can advocate for those rights that you just mentioned?
Well, one way, as I mentioned earlier, is that consumers have the right to choose. So if you realize that a business place has an item for a very high price and another has it for somewhat low, you could patronize the business where the price is low. But what I find happening in St. Kitts is we tend to argue a lot, and we do not realize the power that we have as consumers, as I mentioned earlier. If you decide you're going to take your business to another establishment, only two things could happen. Is either they're going to, the business with the higher price, they're going to lower the price, or they're going to stop selling that particular item. So we must always be mindful of the power that we have as consumers. I wanted to touch on one thing, which is food prices, as we're on that right now. I wanted to inform the public of what are the price-controlled food items. And these are chicken frozen, meats frozen, fish frozen, meat salted in brine, fish salted in brine, which is like your Vienna, your saltfish, sorry.
Yes.
Vienna sausage, cornmeal, dried peas, cereal, butter, margarine, pasta products, cheese, sardines, tuna, and fish, fresh fruits and vegetables, toothpaste, lard, disposable diapers, adults and children. But what I wanted to highlight is that these items are subjected to, the frozen items are subjected to a 25% markup, and the dry items are subjected to a 20% markup. Now, these items do not make up all the food items that you would find in a supermarket, and I think that's where the kind of misconception comes in with the public. All foods are not price controlled. It is only these items that are in the food basket are price controlled, but the price control mechanism is based on the landed cost of these items. Okay. So the 25% and the 20% is based on what the landed cost is at the port. Okay.
So how will consumers know if the markup is within the 25%? Because as Hortensia mentioned, the rate at which the prices are going up, the store could simply say, oh, well, the price has gone up.
Well, we do our internal checks. We get information from customs. Sometimes we get information on particular items if we realize that the prices have jumped drastically.
Okay.
Because officers from the department, they do their weekly checks at the supermarkets. So we would be able to see fluctuations in prices. So we do our internal checks, and if we realize that the price is actually higher than what it is supposed to be based on the markup, we would have a discussion with the wholesaler to actually find out why that is the case.
Okay.